Hello again. My name is Sam Robinson, and this is the Gnostic Syncretist Podcast. Thank you for joining me tonight. And thank you for being here, no matter what your background or belief system. Everyone is welcome. Today is the solstice of this year, 2025, a very pivotal year, if you ask me. One that will see many changes, but one change we will not see is that the forces arrayed against the human spirit have absolutely not been defeated by any measure or by any amount, even one scintilla of degree. So this is why today I want to do a video on what is a very pivotal esoteric topic, and one not talked about very much except for the likes of G.G. Young and Dark Journalist, two great podcasters on YouTube. And they talk about, and in this lecture I'm going to talk about two things. One is called the eighth sphere, and the other are the counter forces of man's spiritual development, which are the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic forces. Though I'm mainly going to be focusing on the Ahrimanic forces, which is mentioned by Rudolf Steiner in his many lectures, but has not been well fleshed out in video format and media content, and needs to be, as it directly relates to the ideas of transhumanism and artificial intelligence and the what you would call the mineralization of the human spirit, a hardening and a crystallizing of their soul and spirit, spiritual aspects and spiritual bodies that Steiner warned about 100 years ago, almost exactly. And a lot of people are unaware of these spiritual influences. So they are spiritual, whether or not, and these are lower astral entities that were part of the chain of evolutionary development and left their chain of development. They were they're called the Lords of Wisdom, and then they're Lords of Form. The Lords of Wisdom are the Ahrimanic beings. The Lords of Form are the Luciferic beings. And the eighth sphere relates to both of them. It is an area not much talked about in occult topics, as it is related to very secret things. And so barely any information has come out regarding the eighth sphere. The eighth sphere is what you would call an area of manifestation that is invisible to us, but is all around us and in relation to the earth chain. As you could say, it's almost in a sense below the earth chain, and in the Kabbalah this would probably be called the sphere of the Qliphotic forces, or the Qliphoth, which are the forces of imbalance, forces of disequilibrium, the forces of opposition to spiritual development and growth, and the forces of evil. This is part of what in the biblical text would be called the war in heaven. And the war in heaven is still going on, and it's not waged between like shining beings of light with swords and shields and, fighting a great battle against demonic looking entities with horns and, red bodies and like sharp teeth, who are, and they're in some great grand like physical battle. No, this is a battle for ideas and concepts and spiritual systems of belief and our own social cultural ways of thinking and interacting on the earth sphere and with each other. It is a battle for the soul of humanity, and this battle for the soul of humanity is being lost at this point, and we need to do something to prevent this from totally occurring in its full extent. And so what the eighth sphere is the area of what you could call astral and etheric refuse, which is gathered into kind of like an almost like astro-etheric garbage dump of overused and no longer useful forces for cosmic development that either come off us or come off the Earth sphere. And there is a great reluctance to mention this in the occult traditions and only a few handful of people have mentioned it. C.W. Harrison, Blavatsky, A.P. Sinnott, Rudolf Steiner are really about it, and it's considered some of the most important information because it had to do with, well, one, it had to do with a certain dark occult brotherhoods who utilize this eighth sphere to engage in a form of necromancy. When they draw, they would have people, they would either have them killed in a ritual sacrifice, or would interact with ones that had already died. And while they're still here and in a state of kama loka on the earth, for whatever reason, they are drawn to the eighth sphere. And in these occult brotherhoods, these dark occult brotherhoods, were using this, according to Steiner, to draw beings into the eighth sphere after death, and then to utilize them as a force of imbalance and black magic and sorcery in the world. And that they needed these spirits of the dead to do that. Their astral bodies and their disembodied souls were being deliberately drawn into this eighth sphere influence, which is a regressive form of development. It is absolutely the opposite end of the chain of the evolution of spiritual development in humanity and beings in general. And it represents all the negative qualities and all the gross materialistic dross of energy wafting off human beings in an astral state. And it's drawn down to this eighth sphere, which is populated and being actively worked upon by these Ahrimanic and Luciferic beings, who are beings that were on a particular developmental path. They're higher than we are, in the sense that they were further along in their development, but they, for whatever reasons, there are certain reasons, decided to essentially jump out of their evolutionary path and chain of development and go their own way. And when that happens, you basically get drawn into the eighth sphere. And so that's where these beings are populated. And this eighth sphere is kind of like a lower astral dimension around the earth. Like I said, where all the dross goes down. All the spiritual dross, everything that cannot be used for furthering evolution. This is where it ends up. This is why it's so similar to the Qliphoth in the Kabbalah. And the eighth sphere is gradually taking more and more form and will become a real sphere in the future, and maybe not that distant. This is where you get the New Age idea of like two Earths. One Earth is the future of spiritual humanity, and the other is the backward regressive Earth of the eighth sphere. And there will be people that end up there, unfortunately, but it doesn't have to be the entirety of humanity that ends up in this eighth sphere-like state of consciousness and being, run and controlled and manipulated and influenced by these, lost, fallen Ahrimanic and Luciferic forces, which seek to halt man's spiritual development and seek to force us back into earlier states of development that we've already passed. Lucifer wants us to stay in the realm of mind and kind of like an ecstatic state of spiritual existence without being grounded in any sort of a grounding of the earth. They want us off the earth chain, like above it, so to speak, spiritually. And we needed that way back in the day. There was a point for Lucifer, and they are said to have given us our will and our individuality. But they did it at the wrong time. And according to Steiner, there was an incarnation of Lucifer of over 3,000 years BC. And then there was Christ, and then there was supposed to be a future incarnation of Ahriman. But at the moment, the Ahrimanic forces and Luciferic forces are vying for the human spiritual development path. And they are working through many means. The main one I want to talk about is the Ahrimanic forces in relation to the eighth sphere. The Ahrimanic forces are beings that want to erase all of our prior development, meaning they want to erase our past and constitute a new cosmic structure where it begins on a materialized and physicalized earth. They want to entrap and ensnare us in complete materialism, scientific materialism, and mechanistic thinking, and create a hardening of the soul and the spiritual bodies to the point of almost materialization of those bodies, or a truncation, a separation from them. And when you look around at society today, you can see this everywhere. The Ahrimanic influence is so profoundly all over the place. It's frightening. And it's really scary because, as you can see, since Steiner died in 1925, what have we seen? What about mechanistics? Well, we've seen the rise of all sorts of technological mechanistic contraptions that have just proliferated everywhere, and they have a benefit, but they have also had a massive detrimental impact on our way of thinking and on our way of existing, to where we've become almost entranced in a disembodied state of materialistic repetition and mechanistic lives of root and routine that is absolutely opposed to our development. We've also inundated ourselves with technologies even more recently that have an electrical aspect to them, and obviously generate a sphere of electricity around it that we can't see, but influences us all the same. And this is in a large part due to the influence of Ahriman and the Ahrimanic forces. They can interact with us through the electrical forces. According to Rudolf Steiner, they interact with us through our sensory existence. They interact with us. They assert the Ahrimanic influence, which asserts itself in human evolution, has to do with lying, with untruthfulness, and the expansion on the effects of untruthfulness. They are the gods of hindrance. They are who want to prevent man from making any spiritual progress whatsoever, because if we make enough progress, they are no longer able to interact with us. They are the origin of fear. They are also Mammon and the god of money. They are the gods of materialistic consumption and consumerism and obsession with the material self. They attack men's bodies and souls, and that says to corrode and ruin them. They increase, in the future they will increase, and the human bodies will waste away from disease and pestilence. They are positioned supposedly in the human etheric body, and that's how they interact with us. And they utilize this etheric double. In some sense, they are our etheric double, but I don't. It's not fully like that. But that's where they're centered, in the ether body. And thus, the rise of etheric technology, like the Ethernet, has been a very big Ahrimanic influence seen in our world. This absolute total connection to a disconnection device through the internet. Everyone says we're more connected than ever. Everyone says that our reach is far greater, and that the world's becoming fully interconnected with these etheric technologies. And instead, what's really happening is the Ahrimanic influence is worming its way and permeating every aspect of our world system and our world view and our way of living, which has become totally inverted and materialistic and become so crystallized that many of us are barely able to even engage with spirit anymore. We're so hardened. We're so soul hardened at this point. And this impulse originally arose in the Atlantean epoch with the rise of the Atlantean sorcerers and black magic, which has also a tie into the eighth sphere. Black magic is tied to the eighth sphere and the beings in the eighth sphere. That's who they interact with. That's who they communicate with when they're doing their black magic rituals. And the Atlanteans were the kings of black magic and black magic ritual, summonings of and interactions with these beings of the Ahrimanic force. And they absolutely utilized it, and they were utilized by Ahriman to further progress his goals of hardening mankind's soul and hardening our spiritual abilities to such an extent that he eventually the Lancers were destroyed due to this Ahrimanic influence over time. And in the case he works, this is called the Belial group, which, were obsessed with technology and utilized the two-eye stone as a weapon as opposed for spiritual development, which was another thing it could be used for. You have... Apparently, Ahriman can recruit from multiple hierarchies of spiritual beings, specifically angels and the spirits of form. And, thus he recruits these Ahrimanic forces, recruit these other beings into following their materialistic and hardening way of interacting with us and with the rest of creation itself. And they have remained behind instead of becoming the cherubim or the seraphim, and they have only remained and become spirits of wisdom. Now, that may sound absolutely counterintuitive to be considered spirits of wisdom when they are definitely spirits of regression, but this is the main goal of the Ahrimanic influence, is the whole physical cosmos to become mineral material. And this is due to the Ahrimanic influence. They want us to become remineralized, which is a stage of spiritual evolution and cosmology that we went through long ago. And you can see this today. This relates to everything that has to do with AI, it has to do with nanotechnologies, it has to do with biotechnologies, it has to do with smartphones, smart apparel, watches, glasses, eventually smart contacts. They're even talking about now getting rid of smartphones and getting, smart augmented paraphernalia that you can use to basically wear. I guess would be largely glasses or probably potentially an insertable that you would no longer need your smartphone. That would be done away with, and certain companies are working on that. I saw an article just the other week where they wanted to get rid of the smartphone. They're done with that. Now they want you to have augmented reality glasses on, which will allow you to do all the same things as your smartphone, but further enmesh you in the illusion of the digital world of this Ahrimanic system and entrapment into a false reality, a simulacrum of the natural realm, the natural world on Earth. That's what this digitalization is. It is a synthetic reality plan and scheme, ensnaring humanity in false paradigms, which are backwards, regressive, and de-evolutionary. We will devolve in these paradigms. We are not ascending higher. We are going backwards. We are losing our skill sets and giving them to AI. We are losing our ability to connect. We're doing it through artificial means, through texting and online communication, and none of it has any of the real spiritual energy and heart energy to it. You see it all the time. People wandering around like zombies with their cell phones under the spell of the Ahrimanic smartphone, and this is absolutely everywhere. It is saturated our environment, especially in America, and it's just unreal, and it's made us far weaker and even more vulnerable to these beings than we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And the eighth sphere is where we are going to end up and where they're drawing us as we dive deeper and deeper into this remineralization stage and this saturation of our environment by these technologies and their electromagnetic emissions like 5G, 6G, and the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies. Ever heard of that? That's another concept where everything will be connected, including bodies, animals, plants, man, on one big smart grid system. And the Internet of Things is the connection of that system through the actual products. The Internet of Bodies is the connection of us into that, integrated into that electrical and digital interface system, to where not only will there be a technocracy that can totally control us on a human level, these beings will be able to interact with us continuously through the electrical level in our etheric bodies. And once you get to the Internet of Bodies, and what is called transhumanism. This is the absolute peak goal of the Ahrimanic influences. They want us to reinsert minerals, which is really what nanotechnologies are. That's mineral based, and remineralize our own bodies back to that earlier stage. They want us to be mineral material beings, cyborgs, which they would be able to influence and control at their will, because they are able to interact with matter more strongly than with spirit. That's why they don't ever want us to reach those spiritual development phases or want us to rise above our lower base natures in materialism, because they won't have any influence anymore. They will be destroyed. They will have lost their influence, and the eighth sphere will develop and manifest, and they'll go their own way, and they'll have to do it to somebody else. They won't be able to do it to humanity anymore. And their goal is to absolutely create a human 2.0 transhumanist civilization of remineralized, nanotechnology-driven human cyborg species that would have, even potentially a hive mind, where, in this plays into what I think would be what we call the Ahrimanic incarnation. I think artificial intelligence is being driven by these Ahrimanic forces. Not that they're in them yet, but I think they may be able to, in some sense, ensoul themselves in those beings or in us, because they're obsessed with mechanistic thinking. They're obsessed with cold reason and dead logic, is what they say in the Steiner lectures. They are absolutely love machines. They want a machine world. They want to eliminate the past and recreate it for humans in a totally crystallized, materialized, dense material realm of machine-like civilization and existence. And for some reason they're obsessed with this. And they want us to be machines. They want the world to be machines. They want to eliminate plants and animals and have an environment completely made up of metal, steel, machines, digitalization, efficiency, dead reasoning only through the means of absolute efficiency and strict, statistical logic. Dead, completely cold. Just cold rationality, absolute ruthless cold efficiency and rationality of a mechanistic thinking, which we see everywhere. We see this everywhere with the use of data. We see this everywhere with the use of constant statistics. I mean, for God's sakes, how much data do you really need? I mean, people wear watches and have cell phone apps, and I'm someone who works out, okay? Let's be real. I work out a lot, and I don't give a crap about what my statistics are on a device, what my heart rate was, what it was compared to the day before, what it was compared to others. There are people that have apps for that, where they can all compare their statistics that their device basically cataloged and compiled from their biosensoring measurements. It's disgusting. To me, that's absolutely disgusting, and it's on the road to transhumanism. You're seeing the datafication of beings who are living, breathing, spiritual entities. The datafication, the mechanistic compiling of their environmental statistical data on how they function as some sort of guidebook for how well you're doing. That's not a guiding principle for human well-being, to measure your data. That data does you no good, really. And eventually it becomes its own form of self-perpetuating thinking, to where you just become obsessed with the data and less with yourself. And that's the end of humanity right there. Once we become datafied mentally and ideologically and socio-culturally, or society is run on the mindset of total efficiency and statistical mechanisms of that efficiency being constantly recorded all the time and constantly measured and countermeasured and contrasted and then ruthlessly enforced upon the different statistics, that's where we're heading. And transhumanism and this datafication are absolutely influences by Ahriman and the Ahrimanic force and the other beings in the eighth sphere, but specifically the Ahrimanic forces that are trying to transhumanize and remineralize our entire society. And they're not doing a terrible job. I mean, AI is moving ahead faster than ever. This is why I don't like Elon Musk. This is why I don't like Sam Altman or Peter Thiel or any of these, Silicon Valley technology CEOs, because they're all absolutely aligned with these beings, whether they know it or not. Some of them definitely do. Some of them don't. And this influence is going to be the end of human spiritual evolutionary development. It will be the end if we end up remineralizing ourselves, which I think it happened within my lifetime, potentially. I don't know. I really hope it can happen in our lifetime. But our society is really headed down a bad path right now, and it's not too late. Steiner actually said 2016 and 2025 will be years of immense development or immense destruction. And clearly Trump doesn't play really any role in this, whatever, but what happened with 2020 and 2021, and everyone knows what I'm talking about, when it comes to what we take into our bodies, that was absolutely and 100% based on Ahrimanic influence, because who knows what went in there and what influences you're now under due to what's now in you, and whether or not it was absolutely what they told you it was, whether it's not a technology that is crystallizing and spiritually hardening or actually severing you from spirit. People have reported on this and said that those things did do that to some people. There have been people reporting on whether or not it cut them off from spirit. I even know someone where I work who said he felt like he'd been severed from his spirit for at least a year after that. And Rudolf Steiner actually warned about that 100 years ago, about the use of those types of products, and how in the future they are going to be working on a way to do that, using those types of medical products to cut you off from spirit. And 6 billion people took this, and who knows what the impacts will be, but that was all clearly the Ahrimanic influence, because, well, you can see the correlation here. I'm trying not to bring up certain words, obviously. And what they want is to give man a special interest in the mineral material, an interest in what is extremely mechanistic. They would like particularly to destroy everything that the Earth has brought over from the old moon period, which was a prior state of evolution. They would like the animal world to disappear, the physical human world to disappear, the plant world to disappear, and of the mineral world, only the physical laws to remain, says Rudolf Steiner. Above all, they would like human beings to be removed from the Earth and to form a new Saturn out of machines. A new world purely of machines. In this way, the world should go on that is actually their ideal. In the domain of external science, it is their ideal to reduce everything to matter, to mechanization. And there you have it. This is absolutely the strongest driving force that I can see in the world at this moment, is this use of mechanistic thinking, this use of augmenting the human body, they call it augmenting anyway, to devolve ourselves by reinserting the mineral into the body to become more machine-like, because for some reason we just aren't good enough, they say. And that this is the wave of the future, this is the future of humanity. Well, it is, if we allow that to happen. And it is not that way if we don't allow it to happen, and we instead decide to utilize technology. One, never insert it ever into our body, that's for damn sure. But two, to utilize it in a way that is spiritually developmental and not so utterly entrancing and, you know, enslaving that we've been the way we've been using it. And it's not that Rudolf Steiner's saying we don't need to have technology. He said it needs to be understood and a responsibility be undertaken when using it, as opposed to just absolutely vegging out and not thinking about what you're doing whatsoever and just engaging on these things continuously, falling into a spiritual like trance, which allows these entities to interact with you and influence you. You have to bear in mind that they will influence you when you are in those states, and to actively fight against falling into that state and will remain spiritually aware while you're utilizing technology, and so thus not to fall under their influence. And that there is a way to move into the future with some technology. Not all technologies are going to be good. No, we don't need any nanotechnology. We don't need any biotechnology. We don't need any... I don't really think we need any sort of artificial intelligence, except for a bare handful of aids for efficiency in a few areas. We surely don't need it running our societies, running our governments, running our law systems, or taking away skill sets from people, unless you're going to find a way to balance that out with a spiritual, some way to turn it to your advantage where they get to develop themselves as opposed to do that work, instead of give everybody a universal basic income and have robots run everything, and then have us have no. I mean, as Elon Musk famously said, which a lot of people don't know, he said, "Your only purpose is to give AI a purpose for existence." Quote from Elon Musk, and that's how he sees it. I mean, now how disempowering is that idea that you only exist to give AI purpose? That's ridiculous. That's satanic. That's Ahrimanic. It's extremely Ahrimanic, and he's, as far as absolutely aligned with these beings, and probably communicates with them regularly, as far as I can tell. He's a total psychopath. And Elon Musk is not here to help us. He is here to help them. And he's certainly doing a great job on that note, with his covering the earth with 5G satellites, and his work on Neuralink, and his work on AI supercomputers in my city, Memphis, which I do not like that he's here. And he's going to steal our power. But he's an absolute danger. But he's not the only danger. There's plenty of other technocrats like him out there. Facebook CEO Jeff Bezos, Sam Altman with his WorldCoin, now just called World. And then you have Peter Thiel in the background with his DoD and DARPA integrated systems for surveilling everyone, and AI database systems being talked about in the news just this week. All this connects back to Ahriman and the influence of the eighth sphere and the Ahrimanic forces upon these people to create this mechanistic world system of data-driven, synthetic simulacrum of a world paradigm where everything is mechanized, everything is statistical, everything is data. There is no substance to it. It is dead. It is cold. It is absolutely without spirit, without heart. And that's where it's taking us. And we don't have to let that happen. We can resist that. We can say no to these concepts. We can say no to these societal worldviews and this push towards a data-driven, smart system civilization where we're reduced to mere parts, mere numbers, mere data. We're not human beings anymore. You're just data. You're just a data farm for these machines that will use you in that way. It's like the Matrix. You're not going to be used for energy. You're going to be used for data and analysis and a form of digital experimentation for numbers. That's where we're heading in this world paradigm that I see it right now. And it's not going to be that way. We're not going to let that happen. Humanity has an amazing future ahead of it in their spiritual evolution. And it is onward to spiritual evolution, the etherizing of the body, the etherizing of ourselves, and the dematerializing of ourselves that we have to head into. Not rematerializing, recrystallizing, and remineralizing that they are pushing on us under the influence of these Ahrimanic forces. There is the those are the two paths that I see for humanity. And we get to pick. We don't have to fall for this influence. We don't have to succumb to their data-driven AI, the human singularity with, machines paradigm. That their ideological monster of a world they see for us, this dystopian transhumanist technocracy of AI-driven smart systems under the influence of these hyperdimensional lower astral beings who are absolutely working their hardest to influence this to occur. And then let's be real, it's not like these people are slaves. They are actively participating in this and are largely part of dark occult brotherhoods that are utilizing this to gain power and influence over objective existence at the expense of the spiritual existence. Thinking it probably they'll become gods, or, they're hoping to become immortal, mineralized cyborg beings. They say that openly, that they're going to extend their lives forever and not going to have to suffer their karmic consequences. Because one, they'll be totally severed from spirit, but two, they think they'll be able to either become cyborgs and use nanotechnology to extend their lifespan forever, or download their consciousness over and over again into various machines. But what kind of an existence is that? You're no longer even human. That's extremely dehumanizing and devolving of where we've come, from where we've come to where that would take us. And that would be the dip into full eighth sphere. That would be absolutely falling as deep into the eighth sphere as you can get. And according to what it says, the only way to get out of the eighth sphere after a being has fallen off its evolutionary chain is to wait until the end of the entire round, which is an unknown amount of millions or billions of years until the end of that round. And then the logos can come down and cleanse all the human astro-etheric garbage and materialized beings that have, haunted the eighth sphere grounds for the last millions of years at that point. They're the only ones that can redeem anyone. The logos is the only one. And that's at the end of the round. We're nowhere near the end of the round. We're halfway through the fourth round according to the cosmology. It's a long time to be stuck in the eighth sphere as fallen beings if we decide to give into these paradigms and allow these crazy powerly transhumanists under the influence of these lower astral harmonic forces to take us there. And it will not be fun. It will not be fun for humanity whatsoever. It will be catastrophic. We will become like them. Now, some of us may, decide to not join them, and, we may die, I guess. Or who knows what we'll suffer. But if we don't decide to degrade ourselves and devolve our bodies or cut ourselves off from our spiritual bodies, we may pass on to a better place along with the earth as it etherizes, and we etherize with it. That's the path to the future in spiritual development. And those are our two paths, to basically remineralize or to etherize, to transcend the material or fall deeper into the material, to rise out of matter into spirit, back up the evolutionary arc, to re-spiritualize ourselves, or to de-spiritualize ourselves even from where we are, which isn't saying a lot, back down into recrystallize and stay permanently in a state of materialistic modes of thought, existence, and being, and to devolve. Instead of going back down, but instead of going up the arc and chain of evolution, we will fall off the chain. We won't even be on the chain anymore. We will have fallen off the entire chain, and we will thus be lost, trapped, fallen beings, existing in the eighth sphere under full crystallized material forces, under the sway of these beings until the end of the round. However long that is, no one knows. But we're not going to go that way, are we? So humanity has a choice to make, and that choice is becoming clearer and clearer and seemingly sooner and sooner every year as things unfold on the geopolitical world stage and in the technological stage and in the I don't know what you call it, systems management stage, where they're starting to create actual AI systems for governance and surveillance and control. I mean, not only do we have that to deal with, we have to deal with the fact that there's also Ahrimanic influence upon us and on them who are doing that, but also upon us to accept it and to think that it's a rational way of living, to be under such data-driven, statistical, technological ways of thinking and existing in societies that are driven by those systems and entirely run by them and eventually would be automated in that sense. And it's not going to go their way, though. The Ahrimanic influence is going to pass out of existence, at least from our part of existence, and it is not going to lay hold to the entirety of the human species and have its way with it. We have a much grander future ahead than that paradigm. So I really wanted to cover this. My name is Sam Robinson. This is the Gnostic Syncretist podcast and the Gnostic Syncretist channel on YouTube. And you can also find some of my work on, or a lot of my work and my blog writings on the GnosticSyncretist.com. And soon I'll be starting a Substack as well. But I've got I've got tons of articles on many things from the mysteries in mystery schools and cosmology on my website, and I'm still working on it, still putting more and more things on there. So please check me out there as well. My name is Sam Robinson. Thank you for watching, and we'll be seeing you here again soon.